That night in the Bronx, Sofia saved a man no doctor dared to touch and paid for it with her innocence. The thunder arrived first, then the blood. Sofia Alberto had just finished mopping the clinic floor when the storm hit Manhattan with biblical fury. Rain hammered the windows of the volunteer medical center like bullets, and the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting shadows that made her 23-year-old hands look older than they were. She was alone. Dr. Patel had left an hour ago, muttering about the subway schedule. The waiting room sat empty, chairs lined up like silent witnesses. Sofia grabbed her bag, ready to lock up, when she heard it. Shouting outside, sharp and desperate, followed by the crack of gunfire. Her heart stopped. The clinic door exploded inward. A man stumbled through, massive and drenched, one hand pressed against his ribs where blood seeped between his fingers like spilled wine. He slammed the door shut behind him with his shoulder, breathing hard, eyes scanning the room with the alertness of a hunted animal. When his gaze landed on Sofia, she forgot how to breathe. He was beautiful in the way a storm was beautiful, dark, dangerous, and utterly uncontrollable. His black hair clung to his forehead, rain and sweat mixing with the blood that stained his white shirt crimson. But it was his eyes that paralyzed her. Black as midnight, sharp as broken glass, filled with a pain so profound it felt like drowning. "No hospital," he said, his voice a low rasp that carried the weight of command. "No police." Sofia's nursing instincts warred with every survival instinct, screaming at her to run. This man was trouble. She could smell it on him. Gunpowder and expensive cologne and something darker she couldn't name. "You're bleeding," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I'm aware." He took a step forward and stumbled. Sofia moved without thinking, catching him before he hit the ground. He was heavy, solid muscle and bone, and the heat radiating from his body told her what she already suspected. He was running a fever. Outside, sirens wailed. The man's grip on her arm tightened. "Please." That single word broke something inside her. Sofia made a choice that would haunt her forever. She locked the clinic door. "Exam room 2, now." He followed her on unsteady feet, leaving a trail of blood across the floor she'd just cleaned. Sofia's hands shook as she cut away his shirt, revealing a gunshot wound just below his ribs, through and through, thank God, but dirty and bleeding heavily. "What's your name?" she asked, threading the suture needle. He watched her with those devastating eyes, silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, barely a whisper, "Enzo." The sirens grew louder, closer. Sofia worked faster, her fingers moving with a precision born of countless practice hours. Enzo never made a sound, even when she cleaned the wound with betadine, even when the needle pierced his skin. He just stared at her face like he was memorizing it. "Who did this to you?" she asked. "People who wanted me dead." His lips curved into something too bitter to be called a smile. They almost succeeded. The sirens passed. Sofia exhaled, taping the final bandage. But when she checked his vitals, her stomach dropped. His pulse was thready, his skin burning. He was going into shock. "Enzo, stay with me." She grabbed IV fluids, started a line, elevated his legs. Nothing worked. His body began to shake, violent tremors that rattled the exam table. He grabbed her wrist with surprising strength, his eyes glassy but locked on hers. "Please," he whispered again, his voice breaking. "Don't let me die cold." Sofia looked at this stranger, this dangerous, wounded, dying stranger, and made the second choice that would change everything. When dawn broke over New York, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Enzo was gone. The exam room was empty except for the blood-stained sheets and a single black onyx ring on the table.
engraved with a family crest Sofia didn't recognize. She picked it up with trembling fingers, still feeling the ghost of his touch on her skin, and wondered if she'd saved a man or made a deal with the devil. Outside, the storm had passed, but Sofia's had only just begun. The news broke 3 days later. Sofia sat in her cramped studio apartment in the Bronx, clutching a cup of cold coffee, watching the morning news with numb detachment. The anchor's voice was clinical, detached. Gang violence erupts in Lower Manhattan, 7 dead in what police are calling a targeted assassination attempt. 1 suspect remains at large.
The screen flashed a grainy security photo. Sofia's cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the linoleum floor. It wasn't a clear image, just a tall figure in a dark coat, face obscured by shadow. But she knew. She knew. The way he moved, the set of his shoulders, the predatory grace even in a blurred photograph. Enzo. She cleaned up the broken ceramic with shaking hands, ignoring the coffee seeping into the floorboards. For days, she jumped at every siren, every knock on the door, expecting police, or worse, the men who'd been hunting him that night. But no one came. The world moved on. The news cycle shifted to the next tragedy. Only Sofia remained frozen in that storm-soaked exam room, feeling ghost hands on her skin. 3 weeks later, she was late. At first, she told herself it was stress. Nursing school was demanding, she was barely sleeping, she'd witnessed something traumatic. But her body knew the truth before her mind would accept it. The nausea that hit her every morning, the exhaustion that no amount of sleep could cure, the way her scrubs suddenly felt too tight across her chest. The pregnancy test she bought from a bodega on Roosevelt Avenue came back positive in 30 seconds. Sofia stared at those 2 pink lines until they blurred, until tears made them run together like watercolors in the rain. She was 23 years old, a nursing student, unmarried, Catholic parents who would never understand, and pregnant with a stranger's child, a violent stranger who disappeared into the night like smoke. No, not a stranger. She knew his name. Enzo. She'd whispered it against his fever-hot skin, had felt it rumble in his chest when he'd held her. She called the school the next day and withdrew for medical leave, packed what little she owned into 2 suitcases, found a cheaper apartment in Queens, where nobody knew her, where she could disappear the way he had. The pregnancy was difficult. Morning sickness lasted all day, her savings dwindled to nothing. She worked night shifts at a 24-hour diner, hiding her growing belly under baggy sweaters until she couldn't anymore, then quit before they could fire her. At her 20-week ultrasound, the technician smiled. "Congratulations, it's twins." Sofia lay on that paper-covered table and laughed until she cried. The babies arrived on a frigid January morning, a boy and a girl, born 2 minutes apart. Luca came first, wailing his fury at the world. Leah followed, quieter but no less fierce, her tiny fist already clenched like she was ready to fight. When the nurse placed them in Sofia's arms, her heart stopped for the second time in 6 months. They had his eyes, both of them, dark as midnight, ancient as secrets. And Luca had a small birthmark on his ribs, right where she'd stitched Enzo's wound. Sofia touched the onyx ring hanging from a chain around her neck. She'd strung it there months ago, unable to throw it away, but unwilling to wear it. The metal was warm against her skin. "I'll keep you safe," she whispered to her children. "I promise. Whatever he was, whatever he did, you'll never have to know." But New York had other plans. 6 months after the twins were born, Sofia was changing Luca's diaper when the television in her neighbor's apartment bled through the thin walls. A news report, volume turned high. Enzo Dante, presumed dead after last year's gang war, has emerged as the new head of the Dante crime family. Sources say the 28-year-old heir has consolidated power with unprecedented speed and ruthlessness. Sofia's hands froze on the diaper tabs. Dante.
a mafia family, one of the oldest, most feared names in New York's underworld. The man she'd saved hadn't been some low-level gang member caught in crossfire. He'd been royalty in a kingdom built on blood and bullets. She looked down at her babies, at his babies, sleeping peacefully in their secondhand cribs, and felt the walls of her small, safe world begin to crack. But she pushed the thought away, buried it deep. The man on the news was a monster. Her Enzo, the one who'd whispered please with dying eyes, couldn't be the same person. Could he?
Most people didn't ask twice. Luca and Leah were 5 now, kindergartners with gap-toothed smiles and their father's unsettling eyes. Luca was protective, serious beyond his years, always watching. Leah was fearless, climbing trees in Astoria Park while Sofia's heart lodged in her throat. They were everything, her entire world condensed into 2 small bodies that smelled like apple juice and crayon wax. The onyx ring still hung around her neck, hidden beneath her scrubs. She told herself she kept it as a reminder of her own strength, nothing more. She never looked up Enzo Dante's name, never searched for news about the Dante family. That part of her life was sealed away like evidence in a cold case. Until the night everything shattered. It was a Tuesday in October, the kind of evening that made Sofia grateful for her job, busy enough to keep her mind occupied, slow enough to actually help the kids who needed her. She was charting vitals for a 7-year-old with pneumonia when the emergency department exploded with noise. Sirens, not unusual, but then came the shouting, the rush of footsteps, the crackle of police radios multiplying like a swarm. Sofia glanced up from her computer as the overhead lights in the hallway strobed red and blue. "VIP coming in hot," someone yelled. "GSW to the chest, heavy security detail, police escort, everyone not essential clear out." Sofia's supervisor grabbed her arm. "Alberto, we need extra hands, you're with me." They ran toward Trauma Bay 1. The hallway was chaos. Uniformed officers, men in expensive suits with earpieces and concealed weapons. Hospital administrators wringing their hands. Sofia had seen dignitaries before, even treated the child of a UN delegate once. But this felt different. The air was electric with danger, crackling like lightning about to strike. The doors burst open. Paramedics rushed in with a stretcher, and Sofia's professional instincts kicked in immediately. Assess, prioritize, act. She moved forward, snapping on gloves, reaching for the patient's wrist to check his pulse. Then she saw his face. The world tilted sideways. No. He was older, harder. The softness that pain and fever had carved into his features 5 years ago had been replaced by sharp angles and a jaw that looked like it could cut glass. His hair was shorter, professionally styled. A new scar bisected his left eyebrow, but the bones of his face were the same, the shape of his mouth, "Ma'am, we need vitals now." The attending physician's voice snapped her back. Sofia's hands moved automatically, fingers pressing against his neck. His pulse was thready but steady. She helped cut away his shirt, expensive, blood-soaked silk, and her breath caught in her throat. There, just below his ribs on the right side, the scar she'd made with trembling hands and borrowed sutures, slightly raised, paler than the surrounding skin, her handiwork. "BP's dropping," someone called out. "Start another line." Sofia worked in a trance, her body moving through practiced motions while her mind screamed. She hung IV bags, called out vitals, helped the surgical team prep him for the OR. Through it all, she avoided looking at his face, terrified he'd wake up, that those midnight eyes would open and recognize her. But then, they did. Just as the anesthesiologist was preparing intubation, Enzo's eyelids fluttered. His gaze was unfocused, morphine-grazed, but it found her face across the controlled chaos of the trauma bay. For 3 heartbeats, time stopped. Sofia saw confusion flash across his features, then something else, recognition, but not quite, like seeing a ghost you're not sure is real.
His lips moved, forming a word she couldn't hear over the machine's beeping urgency. Then his eyes rolled back, and they rushed him to surgery. Sofia stood frozen in the trauma bay long after they had gone, staring at the blood on her gloves, his blood again, while the fluorescent lights hummed overhead like accusatory witnesses. Her supervisor touched her shoulder. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "You have no idea," Sofia thought. She peeled off her gloves with numb fingers, mechanically cleaned up, clocked out 2 hours before her shift ended, claiming nausea. No one questioned it. In the staff bathroom, she locked herself in a stall and pressed her forehead against the cool metal door, trying to breathe. The name on his admission chart burned in her mind. Dante Enzo, DOB, 04-15-1990. Next of kin, redacted.
Enzo Dante, the Mafia Boss, the monster the news whispered about in tones usually reserved for natural disasters, the father of her children. That night, Sofia sat on her fire escape in Queens while the twins slept inside, clutching the onyx ring so tightly it left impressions in her palm. Below, the city sprawled endless and indifferent, lights glittering like broken promises. Somewhere across that sea of concrete and steel, Enzo Dante lay in a hospital bed, alive because she'd saved him, again. And this time, he'd seen her face. Sofia called in sick the next day, and the day after that. But by the third morning, her supervisor's voicemail made it clear: show up or lose the job she desperately needed. So she walked back into St. Helena Medical Center with her head down and the onyx ring tucked deep beneath her scrubs, praying to a god she'd stopped believing in that Enzo Dante had been transferred to some private facility where men like him recovered behind bulletproof glass and armed guards. The prayer went unanswered. "Alberto, you're assigned to post-op recovery, 4th floor, private wing." Her supervisor didn't look up from her clipboard. "VIP from 2 nights ago is asking for the brunette nurse who assisted in his intake. That's you." Sofia's stomach dropped through the floor. "I can't. I'm pediatrics, not post-op." "Hospital administrator's orders. Apparently, the patient is very insistent. Room 412. Don't keep him waiting." The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt like ascending to the gallows. Sofia watched the numbers climb, 3, 4, and considered running. She could grab the twins from kindergarten, drain her savings account, disappear into America's vast anonymity. People did it every day. But running required money she didn't have, and questions she couldn't answer. Not yet. The private wing was quiet, sterile, guarded. 2 men in dark suits flanked the hallway, earpieces visible, jackets cut to conceal weapons. They watched her approach with the flat, assessing stares of professional killers. "Nurse Alberto." Not a question. They'd been expecting her. He opened the door to room 412. Enzo Dante sat propped against pillows, shirtless except for the bandages wrapped around his chest. 5 years had transformed him from a wounded animal into an apex predator. His shoulders were broader, muscles defined beneath olive skin, marked with scars. A roadmap of violence survived. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold. Still midnight black, but colder now, emptied of the desperation she remembered. Until they landed on her throat. Sofia watched his gaze drop to where her pendant rested against her collarbone. The chain had slipped out when she'd bent to retrieve her ID badge in the elevator. The onyx ring caught the harsh hospital lighting, the engraved crest unmistakable. Enzo's entire body went rigid. The heart monitor beside his bed picked up speed, beeping faster. "Close the door," he said quietly. His voice was deeper than she remembered, roughened by years of giving orders that people didn't refuse. Sofia's hand trembled on the doorknob. She pulled it shut, sealing them in together. "Where did you get that?" Each word was carefully controlled, but she heard the earthquake beneath them. She'd prepared for this, rehearsed it during her sleepless nights. "From a patient, years ago." Her voice came out steadier than she felt.
He left it behind after treatment. What patient? I don't remember his name. It was a long time ago. Enzo's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath stubble he hadn't been allowed to shave yet. He stared at her with an intensity that felt like being dissected. That ring is custom forged, one of 3 in existence. My father wore one, my uncle had another, and I had the 3rd, until I lost it 5 years ago. Sofia's heart hammered so hard she's certain he could hear it. Then perhaps your patient found it. I wouldn't know. You're lying. Not accusatory, observational, like he was stating a simple fact. Mr. Dante, I need to check your vitals. Look at me.
She did, against every instinct screaming to run. His gaze moved over her face like he was trying to solve an equation written in a language he'd forgotten. Recognition danced at the edges of his expression, maddeningly close but not quite landing. "Have we met before?" he asked. "You were unconscious when they brought you in. I assisted the trauma team, that's all." But her hands were shaking when she reached for the blood pressure cuff, and they both knew it. Enzo caught her wrist, not roughly, but firmly, and turned her hand over. His thumb brushed across her palm, tracing the lines there like he was reading Braille. "The Bronx," he whispered suddenly. 5 years ago, a clinic during a storm. Sofia's blood turned to ice. There was a nurse. His eyes lifted to hers, and she watched the pieces fall into place behind them. She had kind eyes, gentle hands. She saved my life when she should have let me die. His grip tightened fractionally. She looked exactly like you. "You're confusing me with someone else." But her voice cracked on the lie. Enzo released her wrist and leaned back against his pillows, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. "Maybe," he said softly, "but I don't think so." He dismissed her with a slight nod, and Sofia fled. She made it to the staff bathroom before her knees gave out. That night, while Sofia fed her twins spaghetti and pretended everything was fine, Enzo Dante made a phone call from his hospital bed. "Marco," he said when his head of security answered, "I need you to find everything about a nurse named Sofia Alberto. Employment history, medical records, financials, everything." He paused, touching the place on his ribs where an old scar itched beneath fresh bandages. "And Marco, I want to know where she was 5 years ago. Every single day." "Yes, boss. How deep do we go?" Enzo closed his eyes, seeing kind eyes in a storm-dark clinic, feeling gentle hands that had no reason to save him. All the way down. 3 days later, Marco returned with a file, and Enzo Dante's carefully controlled world exploded into chaos. The file Marco delivered was thin, but it contained enough truth to destroy Enzo's understanding of the last 5 years. Sofia Alberto, age 28, pediatric nurse, address, Queens, NY, employment history, St. Helena Medical Center, 2020 to present, prior, none, education, withdrew from nursing school October 2018, returned January 2020. October 2018, the month after the ambush, the month after the storm. Financial records, sporadic income 2019, consistent poverty level earnings since 2020. Medical records, prenatal care beginning November 2018. Birth records, January 14th, 2019. Twins, 1 male, 1 female. Father, unlisted. Enzo stared at those dates until they burned into his retinas. 9 months. The twins were born exactly 9 months after that night in the Bronx. Children's names, Luca Alberto, Leah Alberto. Current age, 5 years. Enrolled at PS 122, Astoria. Emergency contact, Sofia Alberto, mother.
No father listed on any documentation. The photograph paperclip to the last page made his heart stop. 2 children on a playground, caught mid-laugh. The boy was serious-faced even in joy, dark hair falling across his forehead. The girl hung upside down for monkey bars, fearless and wild. But it was their eyes that carved a hole through Enzo's chest. Dante eyes, black as oil spills, ancient as blood duts. His eyes, his father's eyes, his grandfather's eyes. Marco, Enzo's voice came out strangled. I need a DNA test. Discreet. Private lab, no names attached. Boss, are you sure? Get me a sample from the kids. Hair, anything. Don't let her know. It took Marco 3 days. The twins attended a hospital-sponsored health fair where St. Helena nurses volunteered. A lost hairbrush in the children's craft room. Strands of dark hair tangled in plastic bristles. The results came back in a sealed envelope that Enzo opened alone in his penthouse office overlooking Central Park. His hands didn't shake. He'd been trained since childhood never to show weakness, but his breathing stopped entirely when he read the conclusion. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. The paper slipped from his fingers.
He had children, a son and daughter, 5 years old, living in Queens, eating cereal and going to public school, and existing in a world he'd never known about. 5 years of birthdays, first steps, first words, scraped knees, and bedtime stories. All of it happened without him. Because he'd left. Because he'd run into the night like a coward, too focused on survival to think about consequences. Because that gentle nurse with kind eyes had saved his life, and he'd repaid her by disappearing. Enzo pressed his palms against the window glass, staring down at the city that had always been his to control. For the first time since his father's death, he felt utterly powerless. Joy crashed through him first, a savage primal surge of mine, then shock, cold and numbing. Guilt followed like a knife between the ribs, and finally, protectiveness so fierce it felt like violence. His children, in a world full of people who'd kill them just to hurt him. He moved before conscious thought, grabbing his coat and keys. Sofia was leaving her apartment building with the twins when the black SUV pulled up. She knew what it was immediately. The tinted windows, the way it idled too smoothly, too expensive for this neighborhood. Luca, Leah, go back inside. Now. But Mama! Now! The children heard something in her voice they'd never heard before and ran. Sofia stood on the sidewalk, her purse clutched like a weapon, as Enzo Dante stepped out of the vehicle. He looked different in tailored clothes, dangerous and wealthy, every inch the Mafia Boss the news warned about. But his eyes, those damned eyes, held something raw and desperate. Sofia! Don't! Her voice could have cut steel. Don't you dare say my name like you have the right. I need to talk to you. About that night. There's nothing to talk about. You got what you needed and you left. End of story. It's not the end. He took a step forward. She took one back. I didn't know, Sofia. I swear to God, I didn't know about...
About what? She laughed, sharp and bitter. About how you ruined my life? About how I had to drop out of school, lose everything, raise 2 children alone because you couldn't be bothered to leave a phone number? I know about the twins. The world tilted. Sofia's face drained of color. What? Luca and Leah, born January 14th, 5 years ago. Enzo's voice cracked. They're mine, aren't they? No, the word came out fierce, feral. They're mine. I carried them. I birthed them. I raised them while you were out there building your empire on blood and bullets. Sofia, please. You can't just appear and claim my children. She was shouting now, months, years of buried rage erupting. You disappeared, Enzo. You left me alone in hell. Do you have any idea what it was like? Being pregnant and terrified and broke? not knowing if the father of my babies was dead or a monster or both. I was dying. So was I. Every day for 5 years, I died a little more. Tears streamed down her face. You don't get to walk back into our lives because you finally figured it out. They don't need you. I don't need you. They're my blood. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. My children. That makes them targets, Sofia. Every enemy I have will come for them the moment they find out. Fear replaced rage on her face. Then leave. Forget you saw us. Let us disappear. It's too late. Enzo's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I already know. And if I know, others will find out. Matteo. A bullet shattered the SUV's window behind him. Enzo moved on pure instinct, tackling Sofia to the ground as gunfire erupted. Above them, her apartment window exploded in a shower of glass. Where her children had been watching from behind the curtains, the gunfire lasted 17 seconds. Enzo counted each one while covering Sofia's body with his own, feeling bullets punch through metal and shatter concrete around them. His security team returned fire from the SUV, and somewhere in the chaos, Sofia was screaming her children's names. When silence fell like a guillotine blade, Enzo hauled her up and ran. The apartment was untouched. Luca and Leah huddled in the bathroom where Sofia had taught them to hide during emergencies, their small bodies shaking but unharmed. Sofia collapsed around them, sobbing, checking for injuries with frantic hands while Enzo's men secured the perimeter. Pack a bag, Enzo said from the doorway. You can't stay here. Get out. Sofia didn't look at him. This is your fault. They came because of you. Which is exactly why you need to come with me. Somewhere safe. Nowhere is safe around you. She turned on him with wild eyes. You bring death everywhere you go. We were fine before you came back. We were fine. Enzo's jaw clenched. Fine? Living in a 4th-floor walk-up in Queens, working double shifts to afford daycare? That's fine to you? It was ours. We were happy. And now, her voice broke. Now they know. Because of you, the monsters know my babies exist. There was nothing he could say to that. It was true, every word. He left them under guard, 4 of his best men stationed outside, 2 more in the hallway. It wouldn't be enough if Matteo truly wanted them dead, but it was all Sofia would accept. For 2 weeks, an uneasy truce held. Sofia went to work. The twins went to school. Enzo's men followed them everywhere like deadly shadows. And every night, Enzo sat in his penthouse staring at surveillance footage of his children, memorizing the way Luca pushed his sister on the swings, how Leah laughed with her whole body. Then came the rain. Sofia's shift ran late, a 7-year-old with appendicitis, a complicated surgery that kept her until nearly midnight. The rain started as she left the hospital, fat drops that turned into a deluge by the time her subway reached Queens. Something felt wrong the moment she turned onto her street. Too quiet. The bodega on the corner was dark. No one stood smoking on the stoops despite the heat that lingered beneath the rain. And Enzo's men, the 2 who always waited by her building's entrance, were gone. Sofia ran. The apartment door hung open, splintered around the lock. Inside, furniture was overturned, lamps shattered, the twins' drawings torn from the refrigerator and scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. Luca? Her voice came out strangled. Leah? Silence answered. The terrible, absolute silence of absence. Sofia's legs gave out. She crawled through the wreckage, checking closets, under beds, in the bathtub where they sometimes hid during thunderstorms. Nothing. No one. Just the faint smell of cologne that didn't belong, and a single child's sneaker, Leah's, with the unicorn laces, abandoned near the door. A phone rang. Not hers. A burner cell left on the kitchen counter, still in its plastic packaging. Sofia grabbed it with shaking hands. Hello? Hello, Sofia. The voice was distorted, run through a modifier that made it sound mechanical, inhuman.
Or should I say cousin, since you're the mother of Enzo's bastards? Where are my children? She was screaming, her voice raw and animal. They're safe. For now. They're sweet kids. Luke is brave, tried to protect his sister, and little Leah has quite the mouth on her. Wonder where she gets that. Please, tell Enzo that I have what he values most. Tell him if he wants them back, he'll give me what I'm owed. The voice twisted with venom. He took my birthright, now I'll take his blood. The line went dead. Sofia was still on her knees, clutching the phone, when Enzo arrived 3 minutes later. She heard his footsteps pounding up the stairs, heard him bark orders to his men, and then he was there, filling the doorway, taking in the destruction with eyes that had gone utterly cold. Sofia. She threw the phone at him. It hit his chest and clattered to the floor. They're gone. Her voice didn't sound like her own. Your cousin has them. He called. He said... She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He's going to kill them, Enzo. He's going to kill our babies. Enzo picked up the phone, listened to the recording the system had automatically saved. With each word, something in his expression calcified into something terrifying. Not rage, but colder. The absolute zero of controlled violence. She nodded, throat too tight to speak. The Red Hook shipyard was a graveyard of rusted metal and broken dreams, industrial corpses slowly being reclaimed by the harbor. The warehouse at Pier 39 loomed against the night sky like a sleeping beast, its windows dark except for a single light burning on the top floor. Enzo's men surrounded the building in silence, shadows moving through shadows. Sofia followed close behind Enzo, the Kevlar vest heavy on her shoulders, her heartbeat so loud she was certain everyone could hear it. They entered through a side door, hinges screaming. The interior was vast and empty, catwalks crisscrossing overhead, the smell of salt water and decay thick in the air. And somewhere in the darkness, Sofia heard it. A child crying. "Leah," she whispered, starting forward. Enzo caught her arm. "Wait." He signaled to his men, who fanned out in practiced formation. Then he moved forward, and Sofia followed. The light came from an office on the second floor, reached by a metal staircase that groaned under their weight. Through the grimy window, Sofia could see two small shapes huddled in the corner. Enzo reached the door first, weapon drawn. He kicked it open. The office was empty, except for a laptop propped on a desk, its screen showing a live feed of another location. In that feed, Luca and Leah sat bound to chairs, tape over their mouths, terror in their dark eyes. And standing behind them, gun pressed to Luca's head, was a man who looked disturbingly like Enzo. Same dark hair, same sharp features, but twisted with something rotten. "Hello, cousin," Matteo's voice came through the laptop speakers. "Looking for something?" Enzo's face could have been carved from stone. "Let them go, Matteo. This is between us." "Between us?" Matteo laughed. "You made it about them the moment you put your bastards in her belly. Did you really think you could have a weakness like this and I wouldn't exploit it? Name your price." "My price?" Matteo's expression twisted. "You want to negotiate? Fine, here's my offer. Your life for theirs. You want your kids back? You give me the Dante Empire and put a bullet in your own head. You've got 1 hour to decide." The feed cut to black. Sofia's knees buckled. Enzo caught her before she fell, holding her upright while his men scrambled to trace the signal. "We'll find them. I swear to you." Sofia's stomach lurched. Enzo's hand found hers in the darkness of the vehicle, squeezed once and let go. His touch was gentle, but his voice, when he spoke into the radio, was carved from ice. "Keep looking. Try the Red Hook properties. And Marco, check the shipyards." "The old Dante shipyards?" Marco sounded surprised. "Boss, those have been abandoned since your father—" "Check them anyway." Something in Enzo's tone made Sofia turn to look at him. In the sodium glow of streetlights passing overhead, his face was shadowed, distant.
"What happened at the shipyards?" she asked quietly. "That's where my father died, where Mateo's father killed him and tried to kill me. I was 17. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. My father was a monster. The world is better without him." He paused. "But Mateo doesn't see it that way. He thinks the empire should have been his father's, that I stole it when I survived." The radio crackled. "Boss, we've got something. Red Hook, Pier 39, the old shipping warehouse. Fresh tire tracks and—" Marco's voice dropped. "We found one of your men, dead. The two who were supposed to be watching her building." Enzo's entire body went rigid. "I'm 10 minutes out. No one moves until I get there." He turned to Sofia. "Stay in the car. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, you stay—" "No." Her voice was steel. "Those are my children in there, which is exactly why you're staying here, where it's safe." "Safe?" She laughed sharp and bitter. "My children are in the hands of a psychopath because of choices we both made 5 years ago. I'm not sitting in a car while someone else decides if they live or die. So you can either take me with you or I'll walk in there alone." Their eyes met in the darkness. After a long moment, Enzo reached beneath his seat and pulled out a Kevlar vest. "Put this on. And Sofia, when the shooting starts, you get down and you stay down. Understood?"
She nodded, throat too tight to speak. The Red Hook shipyard was a graveyard of rusted metal and broken dreams, industrial corpses slowly being reclaimed by the harbor. The warehouse at Pier 39 loomed against the night sky like a sleeping beast, its windows dark except for a single light burning on the top floor. Enzo's men surrounded the building in silence, shadows moving through shadows. Sofia followed close behind Enzo, the Kevlar vest heavy on her shoulders, her heartbeat so loud she was certain everyone could hear it. They entered through a side door, hinges screaming. The interior was vast and empty, catwalks crisscrossing overhead, the smell of salt water and decay thick in the air. And somewhere in the darkness, Sofia heard it. A child crying. "Leah," she whispered, starting forward. Enzo caught her arm. "Wait." He signaled to his men, who fanned out in practiced formation. Then he moved forward, and Sofia followed. The light came from an office on the second floor, reached by a metal staircase that groaned under their weight. Through the grimy window, Sofia could see 2 small shapes huddled in the corner. Enzo reached the door first, weapon drawn. He kicked it open. The office was empty, except for a laptop propped on a desk, its screen showing a live feed of another location. In that feed, Luca and Leah sat bound to chairs, tape over their mouths, terror in their dark eyes. And standing behind them, gun pressed to Luca's head, was a man who looked disturbingly like Enzo. Same dark hair, same sharp features, but twisted with something rotten. "Hello, cousin," Mateo's voice came through the laptop speakers. "Looking for something?" Enzo's face could have been carved from stone. "Let them go, Mateo. This is between us." "Between us?" Mateo laughed. "You made it about them the moment you put your bastards in her belly. Did you really think you could have a weakness like this and I wouldn't exploit it? Name your price." "My price?" Mateo's expression twisted. "You want to negotiate? Fine. Here's my offer. Your life for theirs. You want your kids back? You give me the Dante Empire and put a bullet in your own head. You've got 1 hour to decide." The feed cut to black. Sofia's knees buckled. Enzo caught her before she fell, holding her upright while his men scrambled to trace the signal. "We'll find them. I swear to you."
"Why?" The word came out broken. "Why does he hate you this much?" Enzo was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. 5 years ago, there was a child. 10 years old, wrong place, wrong time. He saw a deal go bad, saw people die. Mateo's father gave the order. Eliminate the witness, all of them, including the kid. Sofia's blood ran cold. I was supposed to pull the trigger. It was supposed to be my initiation, my proof that I was ready to lead. But I looked at that child, terrified and crying for his mother, and I couldn't. His jaw clenched. I let him go, told him to run and never look back. The ambush. The night you came to my clinic. Mateo's father found out what I'd done, called me a traitor, weak, unfit to lead. He and Mateo set me up, shot me, left me to bleed out in an alley. They would have finished the job if I hadn't stumbled into your clinic. He turned to face her fully, and in his eyes she saw the truth. Not a monster, but a man who'd chosen mercy and nearly died for it. I wasn't the monster they painted me to be, Sofia. But that night, you saved what was left of my humanity. You gave me a reason to believe there was still something good in the world worth protecting. Sofia felt her anger crumbling, years of resentment washing away like sand beneath waves. She saw him clearly for the first time, not the Mafia Boss, not the stranger who'd disappeared, but the man who'd refused to kill a child even knowing it would cost him everything. The man who'd whispered please with dying eyes. The man she'd never stopped loving, despite everything. Enzo. Boss, Marco burst through the door. We traced the signal. Warehouse in the Bronx, 3 blocks from where you first... He stopped, glancing at Sofia. 3 blocks from the old clinic. He's waiting for you there. Enzo's expression hardened. Then let's not keep him waiting. The warehouse in the Bronx was burning before they arrived. Sofia smelled the smoke 3 blocks away, acrid, chemical, the scent of gasoline and accelerant mixed with timber. Orange light flickered against the night sky, and her heart, already broken, shattered completely.
No, the word came out strangled. No, no. Enzo was out of the SUV before it fully stopped, running toward the inferno with his men close behind. Sofia followed, the heat hitting her face like a physical blow as they approached the building. "They're inside," Marco shouted, pointing to the 2nd floor where 2 small silhouettes were visible through the smoke. "Boss, the structure's not stable." "I don't care." Enzo's voice was flat, absolute. "Get me in there." They crashed through a side entrance, and the heat became unbearable. Smoke filled Sofia's lungs, making her cough, but she pushed forward, following the shape of Enzo's back through the haze. Around them, the warehouse groaned and screamed, support beams cracking under the weight of fire. Gunfire erupted from somewhere ahead. Enzo moved like death itself, precise, efficient, merciless. Sofia watched through streaming eyes as he put down 3 of Mateo's men without breaking stride. A 4th lunged from behind a burning crate, and Enzo broke his neck with his bare hands. No hesitation, no remorse. This was the monster the city feared. But when Enzo reached the 2nd floor and Sofia saw her children, duct tape binding their wrists and ankles, terror in their eyes, but alive, alive. She didn't care what Enzo had become. She only cared that he'd gotten them here. "Mama!" Leah's scream was muffled by the tape over her mouth. Sofia lunged forward, but Enzo caught her arm. "Wait." Mateo stepped out from behind the twins, gun pressed to Luca's temple. He looked nothing like the composed man from the video. His face was slick with sweat, his eyes wild, his expensive suit torn and stained with soot. "There he is," Mateo said, voice hoarse from smoke. "The great Enzo Dante, come to save his bastards. How noble." Let them go. Enzo's gun was trained on Mateo's head, but they both knew he couldn't take the shot, not without risking Luca. "This is between us, cousin. It's always been between us." "You're right about that." Mateo's finger tightened on the trigger, and Luca whimpered. "You took everything from me, my father, my birthright, my future. You were supposed to die in that alley 5 years ago. You were supposed to—"
"I know what I was supposed to do," Enzo interrupted quietly. "I was supposed to kill that child. I was supposed to prove I was strong enough to lead, but I couldn't, and your father paid for my weakness with his life when I fought back." "He paid?" Matteo laughed, sharp and broken. "You think you paid enough? You think taking over the family, consolidating power, living like a king while I scrapped for territory in your shadow, you think that's justice?" "No." Enzo's voice was steady. "There is no justice in this life. There's only choices. And I chose mercy once. It nearly killed me, but it also led me to her." He nodded towards Sofia. "And to them, my children, the only good thing I've ever created in this world." Above them, a beam cracked with a sound like a gunshot. The ceiling sagged, raining embers. "We don't have time for this," Marco shouted from the stairs. "The whole structure's coming down." "Then we'll all burn together," Matteo snarled. "The Dante line ends tonight." "Don't do it, Enzo!" Sofia's voice cut through the chaos. She stepped forward, placing herself between Enzo's gun and Matteo, her hands raised. "Don't pull that trigger. Don't let blood make you what he is." "Sofia, move!" "No, you," she looked at Matteo, seeing not a monster but a broken man consumed by grief and rage. "You can still walk away. You can still choose to be better than your father, better than this." "Get out of the way," Enzo growled. "Listen to her," Matteo mocked. "The little nurse thinks she can save everyone." "Did you tell him, Sofia? Did you tell him how you saved his pathetic life? How you spread your legs for a dying stranger?" Enzo's control snapped. He moved forward, and Matteo's hand shifted from Luca to Sofia. Everything happened in the space between heartbeats. Matteo lunged, gun rising. Sofia saw the barrel turn toward her, saw Matteo's finger squeeze the trigger. She heard Enzo scream her name. Then, his body slammed into hers, tackling her sideways as the gun discharged. The bullet meant for Sofia's chest caught Enzo in the back. He went down hard, blood spreading across his white shirt in a bloom of crimson. Matteo raised the gun for a second shot, but Marco was faster. 3 rounds center mass, and Matteo crumpled against the wall, sliding down to sit among the flames. Sofia couldn't hear any of it. She was on her knees, rolling Enzo onto his side, her hands pressing against the wound just below his shoulder blade. Blood pulsed between her fingers, hot and insistent. "No, no, no!" She was crying, screaming, she couldn't tell. "Enzo, stay with me! Don't you dare!" His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "The kids! Marco's getting them out. They're safe. But you," her voice broke, "you can't die. Not again. Not like this." "Sofia," he coughed and blood flecked his lips. "I'm sorry. For everything. For leaving." "Shut up." She pressed harder on the wound, feeling his life leak away beneath her palms just like that night 5 years ago. "You don't get to apologize. You don't get to die. You promised you'd bring them home, and you did. So now you have to stay." Around them, the warehouse was collapsing. Beams crashed down, flames roared higher. Marco was shouting for them to move, to run, but Sofia couldn't leave him. Not again. "Please," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. "Don't die on me again. Please, Enzo. I can't lose you again." His hand found hers, sticky with blood. 5 years ago, he breathed, "you saved a monster." "No," she was sobbing now. "I saved a man. The only man I've ever—" She couldn't finish. Enzo's eyes closed, and his hand went slack in hers. "Enzo!" Strong arms pulled her away. Marco, dragging her toward the stairs, while 2 other men carried Enzo's limp body. Sofia fought like a wild animal, screaming his name, but they didn't stop.
They ran through the collapsing inferno, through smoke and flames and falling debris, out into the cold night air where ambulances were already screaming their arrival. The twins were there, freed from their bonds, wrapped in blankets. They ran to Sofia, clinging to her legs, crying. She held them with arms that felt numb, watching as paramedics worked on Enzo's body in the back of an ambulance. "Is Daddy going to die?" Luca asked in a small voice.
Sofia looked down at her son, their son, with Enzo's eyes and his serious face, and realized he'd called him Daddy. That somehow, in the space of this terrible night, everything had changed. "No," she whispered, praying it was true. "He's not going to die. He's too stubborn for that." Behind them, the warehouse collapsed in on itself, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky like prayers burning their way to heaven. Enzo spent 3 weeks in the ICU at St. Helena Medical Center. Sofia practically lived there, splitting her time between his bedside and the hospital's pediatric wing, where someone had quietly arranged for the twins to stay in a private family room. No one questioned it. No one asked who was paying for the round-the-clock security or the private nurses. Money, it seemed, could buy silence, even in the aftermath of a catastrophe. The first time Enzo opened his eyes, Sofia was there, reading Where the Wild Things Are to the twins curled up beside him on the hospital bed. His hand twitched against the sheets, and her head snapped up. "Hey," she whispered. "Hey," he whispered back, and smiled, weak, exhausted, but real. Luca and Leah woke up then, and for the first time, Enzo held his children while conscious. Luca was hesitant, still processing trauma, but Leah climbed onto the bed and pressed her small hand against his chest, feeling his heartbeat. "You're still alive," she said, as if surprised. "Yeah, Piccolina, I'm still alive." The Dante Empire fell like a house of cards. Federal raids hit simultaneously across the 5 boroughs. Warehouses, businesses, properties that had been Dante holdings for 3 generations. The investigation had building for years, but Enzo's cooperation, names, dates, account numbers, everything, accelerated the timeline. Marco took a deal. Most of the family's lieutenants followed suit. By the time Enzo was discharged from the hospital, there was nothing left to lead. The kingdom his father had built was dismantled, its foundations salted like ancient Carthage. "You gave it all up," Sofia said one night, watching him stand at her apartment window, staring out at Queens like he was seeing it for the first time. "I gave up nothing. I gained everything."
He was different now, quieter. The dangerous edge that had made him terrifying was still there. Sofia didn't think that could ever fully disappear, but it was sheathed, controlled. He wore jeans and plain t-shirts instead of tailored suits. He learned to make pancakes for breakfast. He sat through parent-teacher conferences and helped Luca with homework and let Leah paint his nails electric blue. He became, impossibly, a father. But he and Sofia existed in a strange limbo, living together but not together. Co-parents bound by trauma and children, but separated by 5 years of hurt that couldn't be healed overnight. Until the morning, Sofia decided to visit the old clinic. The Bronx Volunteer Medical Center had been rebuilt after a fire 2 years ago. Newer, brighter, but still serving the same neighborhood that had always been forgotten by the rest of the city. Sofia had donated to the rebuilding fund anonymously, using money she'd never told Enzo about, money she'd saved for 5 years, just in case. She was volunteering that Saturday, the twins at a birthday party with Marco's kids, because even former Mafia enforcers had children who needed playdates. She'd just finished bandaging a 7-year-old scraped knee, promising him a Spider-Man sticker for being brave, when the door opened. Enzo stood in the entrance, backlit by morning sun. He wore a simple gray Henley and jeans, no guards flanking him, no weapon visible at his hip. He looked younger somehow, less like the king of an empire and more like the wounded stranger who'd stumbled through these doors 5 years ago. Sofia's breath caught. "Hi," he said, and his voice was uncertain in a way she'd never heard before. "Hi." She stood slowly, aware of the other volunteers watching, the patients pretending not to stare. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see it." He looked around the clinic, the clean floors, the stocked supply cabinets, the children's drawings taped to the walls, the place where it all began, where you... He stopped, swallowed hard. "Where you saved my life." Sofia walked toward him, closing the distance. "Enzo." He dropped to one knee. The clinic went silent. Someone gasped. Sofia's heart forgot how to beat. From his pocket, Enzo pulled out the black onyx ring, the same ring Sofia had worn on a chain for 5 years, the ring she'd finally given back to him in the hospital, saying it belonged to him, not her. "5 years ago, you gave me life," he said softly, looking up at her with those midnight eyes that had haunted her dreams. "You saved a stranger who didn't deserve saving. You carried my children and raised them alone, and built a life from nothing because I was too much of a coward to stay." "You weren't a coward." "Yes, I was." His voice was steady. "I ran because I thought I was protecting you from my world, but I was really just protecting myself from caring too much, from having something to lose." He held up the ring, and it caught the light streaming through the windows. "I don't have an empire anymore, Sofia. I don't have power or money or anything that made me important. All I have is this ring, and 2 children who have your smile, and the rest of my life to spend proving that I'm worth the mercy you showed me." Tears were streaming down Sofia's face. "Enzo, let me spend the rest of my life giving you everything you deserve, not money or protection or any of that. Just me, the man you saved, the man who loves you, the man who wants to wake up every morning and make you coffee and help the kids with homework and grow old watching you save other people the way you saved me." Sofia looked down at him. This man who'd been a stranger, then a ghost, then a monster, and now was simply Enzo. Flawed, broken, trying so desperately to be better. She saw the scar on his ribs beneath the thin fabric of his shirt, the newer scar on his back where he'd taken a bullet meant for her, the silver at his temples that hadn't been there 5 years ago, the way his hands shook slightly as he held the ring. "Yes," she whispered. His eyes widened. "Yes?" "Yes," she laughed through her tears. "You stubborn, impossible man. Yes." Enzo stood, sliding the ring onto her finger where it belonged, where it had always belonged, and kissed her. It was nothing like that desperate, fever-hazed night 5 years ago. This was gentle, reverent, a promise sealed in daylight instead of darkness. The clinic erupted in applause. They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the same church where Sofia's parents had wed 40 years before. Luca was the ring bearer, serious and proud. Leah was the flower girl, who threw petals with such enthusiasm that some landed in the priest's hair. Marco stood as best man, wearing an ill-fitting suit and a genuine smile. Sofia's nursing school friends filled the pews alongside former members of Enzo's organization who'd taken plea deals and were trying, like him, to build something better from the ashes. When the priest said, "You may kiss the bride," Enzo cupped Sofia's face in his hands and whispered, "Thank you for saving me." "Thank you for letting me," she whispered back. 5 years later. The Bronx clinic had expanded into a full community health center, funded by an anonymous donation large enough to serve the neighborhood for decades.
Sofia ran the pediatric wing, and twice a week, a tall man with dark hair and kind eyes volunteered in the intake office, greeting patients and helping with paperwork. No one knew he'd once been Enzo Dante, feared Mafia Boss. To them, he was just Enzo Alberto, Sofia's husband, Luca and Leah's father, the man who remembered everyone's name and always had candy for the kids. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Sofia woke to find Enzo already awake, watching her and the gray dawn light filtering through their bedroom curtains. "What are you thinking about?" she murmured. "That night," he said quietly. "The storm. How I almost died in that exam room. How I should have died." Sofia touched the scar on his ribs, faded now, barely visible. "But you didn't." "No." He caught her hand, pressed it against his chest where his heart beat steady and strong. "I lived, and every day since has been borrowed time. Time I don't deserve but will spend every second earning." "You've earned it," Sofia said firmly. "You've more than earned it." From down the hall came the sound of footsteps, now 3 sets instead of 2. The twins were 10 now, and last year they had adopted a little girl from foster care, a 6-year-old named Rosa, with trauma in her eyes that Sofia recognized from the mirror. "Mama, Dad, it's Saturday!" Leah's voice carried through the apartment. "You promised pancakes."
Enzo smiled, that real smile that transformed his face, that made him look like the man he'd become instead of the man he'd been. "Duty calls." "Wait." Sofia pulled him back, kissed him slowly, thoroughly. "I love you, Enzo Dante." "I love you, Sofia Alberto." He kissed her forehead. "My savior, my conscience, my home." They got up together, walked down the hall together, and made pancakes for their children together while rain began to fall outside. Gentle this time, not a storm, but a blessing. And in Sofia's jewelry box, the black onyx ring rested beside her wedding band, a reminder of the night one desperate choice had changed 2 lives forever. The night a nurse saved a stranger. The night a monster learned he could be a man. The night everything, absolutely everything, began. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoy emotional stories of love, sacrifice, and destiny, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one.